This is our heritage. If you're my age, then the idea of industry is of something that happens somewhere else. And most of my toys when I was a kid tended to say made in China on them somewhere. So the idea of things being made in one's own area is kind of a strange one. But Grey Bruce and Owen Sound have a distinguished history of industry, and we're going to talk about that today. And to that end, I'm welcoming the MPP for Bruce Grey Owen Sound, Mr. Bill Walker. Bill, welcome to the program.
My pleasure, thank you.
All right. So we're going to talk, we got a whole lot of interesting things to talk about, but to kick things off, I want to ask about your roots in the area. You're from a family who's been here for a good while, I understand.
Absolutely, and very proud to be here from the area. My family has been here for over 100 years. My mom grew up in the Lake Charles area, my dad grew up in the Hepworth area, and the village of Hepworth is where I grew up and spent most of my childhood there and working in Wyerton, actually.
As a son of Kimberly, then we both got roots going back about a fair chunk of time.
Absolutely.
And so you've, obviously representing the region, you've seen a great deal of it, and in particular, I've talked to a few people in the program who have talked about Owen Sound being quite the hub of economic activity, and it's in different ways at different times. There is a great deal of industry that once stood here. Some of it's still here. I've heard about Owen Sound being the toothpick capital of the world, for one example, and I've talked to others about the railway. But of course, it bears remembering that there's that lovely Great Lake over there, and at one time a great deal was coming through there. So tell me about that.
Well, I think the marine heritage is a big part of our heritage and our culture going way back. I mean, particularly on the peninsula, which is where I'm most well known and most well versed, the Propeller Club still exists. In fact, they're coming up to a fairly significant anniversary. A lot of the people, a lot of the men, particularly off the peninsula, at one time or other sailed. When you come into Owen Sound, of course, there were the foundries, the Corbett Foundry, the Kennedy Foundry, had significant large businesses which employed a lot of people in this area and played a big role in the early settlement and development of our community.
Tell me about the Propeller Club, because that's a very suggestive name.
Well, the Propeller Club is just that. It was a club started by the sailors, and in fact by the wives of sailors, so that when they would come home on leave, that was an opportunity for them to socialize, and they had a gathering place, and it has remained, and it's just not off the top of my head which significant anniversary, but I know it's coming up this year, this fall, I think in August, they're having a large celebration, either their 75th or their 100th year, I think it is.
Something for our viewers to Google.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a wonderful club because a lot of those people still have roots there. Ross Turner is a guy who sailed, I think, for 43 years. He's been part of the club for 65 years, and he's still there. And I see him at various functions volunteering, whether it's behind the bar, setting up, taking down. They're very, very integral to the community. And that is that heritage of a lot of, I think, the mariners were away, and when they came back, they wanted to give back to that community that they missed so much.
Quite so. And with regards to that, now we habitually use the word sailing, but of course we're not talking about hobby sailboats, are we?
Correct. No, they were on the Great Lake freighters, and again, many in my family. My dad was a sailor. A lot of my uncles were sailors, and I think if you talk back in that generation, almost everybody that came out of high school at one point or another became a sailor. Whether it was long term or short term, in my case, it would have been short term because I don't think I could have taken the rocking of the seas. But it was a natural thing. Captain Greg up on the peninsula, I know him quite well. You know, he's been a captain up probably for 30 or 40 years now, and again, a strong heritage and linked to certainly Georgian College today.
Yeah, and what the freighters, of course, my first thought is the sad fate of the Edmund Fitzgerald, but what sort of things are moving through Owen Sound on those sorts of freights?
Well, certainly a lot of logging, I think, in the early days, back in those days, and certainly crops, and that continues today. I mean, again, yes. The harbor now, there's lots of talk about P&H certainly use it. Salt comes into our harbor and out of our harbor, so I think there are a lot of things. Cement comes into the harbor now, but I think back in those days it was mostly logging. I'm not certain how much livestock, but certainly the crops, the wheat, the grains from the area, and that still plays a significant role and needs to, in my opinion, play a significant role. Some have referred to us as the Chicago of the North, Owen Sound, way back in the day. And it has been that regional hub, that regional economic hub for all of Bruce Grey and area.
And the ships are all coming here, and then the railroads are spread out.
Exactly,
as well.
exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like I'm downtown, so I can't see the waterfront too well. But it was and as maintained a great deal of traffic and activity. The foundries in particular, I mean, tell me about the foundries.
Again, I'm not an absolute student of I'm kind of glossing over the history, but I mean there were big factories, large employers of many people, and some of the key things like the propellers. You'll see the brass propellers that were made here during the war years, before the war and after the war. So I think they played a significant piece, and those families thrived because of those factories that were right here on the shore.
So they're making the propellers of the boats whole, right? Put them together here.
Absolutely, the foundry. I mean, they poured them here, they made them here, and assembled the pieces here. So again, I don't know all the various things, but certainly propellers were a big component of both of those foundries, to the best of my knowledge.
And of course, here and down in Collingwood, you've got the shipbuilding industry.
Absolutely.
Going a mile a minute. It's been, I imagine, in the war years, particularly lively. So,
absolutely.
All right, and then a number of other industries of interest as well. There's one that you mentioned to me, PPG.
Yeah, certainly the glass plant. So it was a floating glass plant. It was here for many, many years. Both my brothers actually worked there. A number of my cousins worked there. And, I think in its heyday, it employed 600 plus people. Again, a significant volume in an area like this. And for 35 years, that was kind of a predominant industry in our community, and had a ripple effect, which was significant.
Mm-hmm. And some more popularly known names, some of the big businesses were here. Goodyear, I understand.
Goodyear, definitely, for the V-belts, and I still call it RBW, but it's Transcontinental Printing, and I mean it's one of the largest, if not the largest, in their whole organization now, right here in our little old Owen Sound. So it plays a significant role in the whole printing industry.
Yeah, and I used to work up at Grey Roots myself, and learned a great deal about RBW from the folks at the print shop.
Right.
So, now I mentioned looking into it. We had one of the businesses that I found mention of was RCA. Now I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, because I think RCA, the company that makes VCRs, but
correct. Yeah, it was television.
It's the same one.
Televisions back in the day, and again, I'm not certain what the numbers were, but I would guess 200 to 400 people back in the high times, the heydays.
So that's extraordinary, because again, as I say, if you're my age or younger, these sorts of manufacturers always happen someplace else. I mean, things tend to say made elsewhere. It varies enormously where that elsewhere might
Sure.
be, but to have all of these sometimes very basic elementary things being made here.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's indicative if you look at a lot of industry now. Back in the heyday, again, we didn't have the ease of transport. We didn't ship to other places outside of North America, if you will. So a lot of factories were right here in our own backyard, or relative proximity to our own backyard, and shipped through North America. But as the global economy started to change, what happened is, of course, wages here were much higher than in a lot of third world countries or developing countries, and particularly the electronics industry, certainly moved ashore or offshore to many other places. And that was the demise of our factory, like an RCA, and many. I mean, it's even happening today with Kellogg's, and a couple of other companies have now moved out of Ontario because of similar types of things.
And we're going to talk about that as well, and about a personal connection that you have with the local industries in a minute.
Sure.
back. So, Bill, moving away from the waterfront momentarily, there is lots of other really basic industries that are going on in Grey County in times past, and I gather that you have a personal connection with one of them. Your family was involved in Hepworth making furniture, I do believe.
Yes, and I'm not certain how many people really are aware that there was a Hepworth furniture factory at one day, and this chair beside us is actually a product of that factory, and there was actually one in Hepworth and one in Southampton, and when the one in Hepworth closed, a lot of the production shipped over to Southampton. In fact, some of my family members, my dad worked there as well as a number of my uncles, so they ended up from Hepworth over to there. But it's certainly a big conglomerate, if you will, from the perspective of Bruce Gray. You've got the Krug brothers in Chesley, which that era just ended with the passing of Mr. Krug last year, unfortunately. Again, I think they employed 600 people there. You had the Durham Furniture Factory. You had people in Walkerton. We still have Bogdan and Gross down in Walkerton still producing furniture, and Durham does still, thankfully, there. So, furniture was a huge staple of our economy back in the day, and I think part of that is because of the great stands of forest that we had around us, that natural resource that was relatively close. We had a good, strong work ethic from our workers here, and those were very viable industries for many years.
It's a curious thing because the idea of wooden furniture as something that you manufacture is, I remember I've worked in Peterborough where they had the canoe building industry. And it's an odd shift that happens from wooden furniture being something you mass produce to something that's thought of as something that's done as an artisanal undertaking. So that's it's fascinating. But this is a Hepworth original then.
That is a Hepworth original. That's from my mom's house. My brother Norm now has it in his collection, and we're quite proud of it, having those local roots.
So this particular one would have been made whenabouts?
Oh, I'm guessing this is back in the probably 50s, 60s, I would guess. I'm not certain. There is a sticker on the bottom I didn't read actually before we come in, so we'll have to check that out.
Yes, we'll have to take a closer look. And it's the industry had its heyday in the 50s, or what was its timeline?
Yeah, I don't know again the exact dates, but I think kind of from the 40s through to the 70s, I believe, is when actually in the late 60s, early 70s, when the Hepworth one, I was probably just being born or just around there when it was closing. But the Southampton was there probably into the late 70s, I think, is when it closed. And of course, it's now the Southampton Market is where that building is. So when people are wandering through there, that's what that factory was. And I believe there was a secondary building as well.
All right, so a good thing to look out for anyone who's interested in built heritage can go have a look for that. We touched on earlier of course the economic shift that caused the decline of Owen Sound's waterfront industry. Are the buildings that house those industries, are any of them still standing as far as you know?
No, virtually I believe they're all gone. The only thing I think that is left now is the Corbett, and there's now the condominiums. The Corbett place, I think it's called, has incorporated a small piece of it. And there was quite a bit of discussion around that time because it was a part of our built heritage, and there was challenges. Some people wanted to keep it, some people wanted to let it go. But my understanding is that would have been the last building standing, and they have incorporated a piece now to try to retain some of that heritage.
And again, was it in about the 70s that the waterfront production started to decline, or was that on a different?
No, I believe somewhere around the 70s. Again, I'm not a historian, so I don't have all these dates in my head, but I think somewhere thereabouts, they may have had a very small piece, and Russell Brothers certainly was here. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs of exactly what Russell Brothers, but they were probably one of the last acting corporations that were, or organizations, industries that were here in the city. And I think as again the global economy started to inch forward, and some of those industries just weren't viable in today's world.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny how I've studied, I've studied all sorts of history, even ancient history, and it's always remarkable to notice how much bigger the world gets the further back you go. How much you have to make on site, as it were.
Absolutely.
So it's a fascinating dynamic, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. Bringing it up to today, what would you say? Is there industry still present in the county in manufacturing of things? Or?
Certainly, there are pockets of industry around, and we've been very fortunate the last couple of years. A new company, Tourist Canada, actually bought the old factory in Chesley, so they're actually doing floors and veneers now, flooring and veneers. And just in the last year, another group of 10 from China again have came over, financiers, and they've started up a manufacturing of equipment component in the other half of the factory. We certainly have Durham factory still going, as I mentioned, Bogdan and Gross down in Walkerton. We still have certainly Monroe here, shock absorbers in the city, and a number of others, Van Wyck Packaging. So the McLean Engineering in our own backyard right here. Chapman's, of course, is an industry unto itself. Chapman's
yes.
Ice Cream. So I don't want to leave anyone at Crystal Springs, water products down in the Beaver Valley. So we do have pockets, EPH technology up on the peninsula, which is for the car manufacturing industry. So we do have pockets. I think what we're becoming more and more of is a specialized market. But I think we also have the opportunity to actually move that trend backwards, because now we are in the global community. We can compete across the world. And I think there are a lot of people that are starting to think that way. McLean Engineering right here in the city, I believe, have 10 plants around the world, and they ship specifically and build specific pieces for the mining industry. So it kind of ebbs and flows with the mining industry, but huge opportunity. And again, I think what we really have here is we have a great workforce, a work ethic that is second to none. A lot of people came off the farm, they're used to hard work, they're used to putting in a full day, and that's very enticing to a company looking to expand or to move back to the area. Bruce Power, of course, is an industry unto itself.
Yes.
Not a manufacturer. Well, I guess they manufacture hydro. So
yeah, there you go. Now, of course, the other, I guess one of the main things that I think will be drawing people to towns like Owen Sound, or when I was in Peterborough, this was the big draw, was the school, and I think you intimated to me that the shipping industry is having a bit of a rebound, and that Georgian College is in a position to do something.
Absolutely, and I think again, we have the simulator. It was the simulator, the best in the world when it was installed. It seems like it was only a couple of years ago. It's probably 5 or 6 at least now.
Oh, okay.
But that whole industry is taking it on. When you speak to the folks at Georgian College, I think they have something like a 97% graduation rate. So again, whether that's on cruise ships, whether that's on the shipping for product, lake freighters, there's a huge renaissance, I believe, and I think Georgian is well positioned because we are obviously on the Great Lakes. It's a great place to be. You have a lot of natural affinity. A lot of people that like the water have came from the water. They have ancestry from the water. So I think it's huge. And you have a company like P&H down in Hanover, which again, and Miller Paving, that utilize the harbor here. And it's a mainstay for their industries. They have to get the product either into this harbor and back out to be distributed, or vice versa. The farm community, the agricultural community is bringing their produce here to be sent out to the world. So it has to play a critical role. Lots of talk going on with the harbor right now and the potential divestiture from the federal government. I remain hopeful that someone will buy that up. And I think, again, with the change in our global economy, shipping has become, again, I think, a cost-effective manner of moving a lot of goods, a lot of freight, which is why this one needs to be dredged, because we need the ships to be able to come in full and leave full. Right now, the harbor has filled in enough that they're coming in kind of half loads, and certain times of the year, if the water's gone down, they're even getting down to quarter loads. So that becomes less sustainable, but why would you not want that ship to come in full and leave full?
Right. As a historian, I'm caught up in it just because one of the always the most exciting and vibrant places to study are the hubs. In history, the places like London in its heyday, or Constantinople, or places like that. But any place like this, we can watch that history happen.
Absolutely.
Very exciting. We're going to take another quick break, and then we'll be right back. we're back. Bill, to take it into the present day again, and to, if I may use a sailing term, change tack slightly, we're in Owen Sound, and certainly in the business I'm in of museums, tapping into heritage as a resource as becoming a big thing, or is a big thing, and of course we have appeared. We're at the Billy Bishop today, and veterans and military heritage are of course very current at the moment. You yourself have served, I understand.
Yes, I served in basic training back in 1987, went to Cornwallis, went through the whole drill like you see on TV, and one of the greatest experiences of my life, actually.
And you have family who served in the wars, I gather?
Yes, yeah, a number of my uncles served in the war. My Uncle Ken, in fact, was injured in the war. He brought some shrapnel back from Germany and fortunately survived, as most of my family did, which is great. Have a very, very strong reverence for the military and those that have served. Billy Bishop does a great job of honoring our veterans. We enjoy the rights, freedoms, and privileges we do today as Canadians because of our forefathers and mothers who gave up their lives, made the ultimate sacrifice, or those that were fortunate enough to come home and continue on. So plays a big role in my life.
By bringing, forgive me, just point of clarification, by bringing back some shrapnel, as in he brought it back as a souvenir, or brought it back?
No, it was unfortunately inside of him. He got hit in the back, and it was too delicate, I guess, too close to his spine for anyone to ever want to go in and do surgery. So yeah, he just kind of toughed it out and kept going with it, and he passed away, many years after he was home, and they don't know whether that was a complication from that shrapnel or not. It was never proven, but.
It's remarkable what people can live through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from your point of view, going through training, sorry, was it Army, Air Force?
I was Air Force, actually, yes.
Okay.
But we were all three in our platoon back in those days. We were mixed. We had 4 platoons, and in fact, 3 male and 1 female platoon. So we were a mixed platoon that way as well.
What does it feel like going through? I've never served myself. What does it feel like going through military training and service with that legacy behind you?
I think you look at it partly as a sense of duty. My family did it. If they hadn't have done their stint, would we have the privileges that we have today? So part of it was driven by that. Part of it was a case of just national pride. I mean, I think it's something that if we don't have a strong military defense system, then it leaves us as a country vulnerable. We're always peacekeepers. We're always people ready to do our part. And I think for me, it was a case, actually, I have 2 much older brothers who used to always say to me, if I had my life to live over, I'd join the Army. So at that point, it was one of those things that stuck with me, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot.
And got the photographs and the...
Yeah, so that's my my graduation photo. I'm not certain which camera. And so that was in graduation dress, and to make it authentic, I actually have my dog tags, which I've kept. So they, again, that kind of symbolized that you were there and you did do it. And fortunately, I didn't have one of those left in my teeth at the end of the day, which means I survived.
That's a good achievement.
No active service.
No, well, and that I was curious about that. How does it, like, obviously, I've talked to veterans in this program, and they joined up knowing that what they were probably going to be getting into. How does it feel knowing that when you're joining up, when there isn't that going on? Is there a sense of frustration, or is it scary, thinking you never know whether something might happen? How does that feel?
I think a little different. I can't obviously speak for those veterans because they did live in a time that it was going to be imminent, that they were going to be somewhere and face that posing situation where they could have their lifeline. In my case, relatively during peacetime is when I was there. But you do sign up, and they can call you on a conscription basis for 2 years, even after you leave. So there is still that possibility. There are the Afghanistans. There are other things going on, nothing the magnitude of the world wars. So I can't compare to those because they were in a different time, different place, but you still have to give that thought that I could be in Afghanistan. I could, and we've had people in our own community not come home.
Is it frightening, or is it...
For me, it certainly was. I mean, I don't know if everybody faces it the same way, but for me, certainly. I mean, when you go and think that actually somebody on that side could be shooting at you, and it's something I've always had that reverence, again, back to those veterans that have came home, and not many that I found really want to talk about it because of the gore and probably the horrible memories, but a pretty daunting place to know that someone on that side of the line wants to take you out. If you're not frightened, I'd be a little worried.
Indeed. So you and I guess, you've done it a good deal more than I have, but spoken to veterans from the area. and they and the stories that they can tell. I mean, part of what I'm doing here is to document that, and the heritage of Owen Sound is a fascinating resource. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Again, one of my proudest days is actually going to Remembrance Day services to honor those that have made the ultimate sacrifice, those that have came home luckily, and just to always perpetuate what those brave men and women did for us.
Indeed. Obviously, hopefully people will get to see me sitting down with a number of veterans in this program, but for those, I'm not going to cover every perspective. I don't have time.
Sure.
You've been connected to the Legion. Obviously, you're a member of the Legion.
Yes.
What can people do? Is it possible? Is it allowed for people who have questions to go to the Legion and talk to people? What's a process that anyone can go through if they want to get more perspective on veterans' experiences?
Well, certainly, I think going to your Legion is the first stop, would be a good place to go. I mean, there are, again, and you have to respect, I think, a lot of veterans don't want to talk because those are horrible memories for them in many cases. Yes. Some do, but I think a place like Billy Bishop, I think your museums anywhere, Grey Roots where there is historical significance, and they typically will have, I think, a listing of people who are willing to speak, so we can never forget. And I think it's important, and I know Art Haley's a guy, he's 98 years old up in Wyerton. He's been remembered, he's been honored by the veterans group here, but Art goes and speaks to the schools still every year at 98 years old. He stood beside me in the Remembrance Day parade in 40 minutes of pouring rain and cold. So those type of things, I think that, particularly for the new generation, for the people your age and down, need to understand and never forget what those men and women did to ensure that we have the country and the backyard that we have today.
Well, and that's why I asked, is I wanted to make sure anybody who's watching will know what resources to look for. I mean, as excellent as it is, the History Channel only gets you so far.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it puts in perspective. I think it puts that human touch. If you know an Art, Glenn Rawson's a fellow that I know in Hanover that flew with the Air Force, and again, he's getting into the advanced age. But those folks, I think, put it into perspective that that's someone's grandpa that you know, or someone in your community. It's not someone on the movie screen. It's not built up. This is the real fact. This is the real deal that you're hearing. And I think that just has power and effect so that young generations can say, holy smokes, I do know that.
So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's great.